Amber and I met when I was 20, and she was 21. Our connection started by chance, during a visit to a mutual friend's home from college. That day, we worked on a project together, which ended with a pleasant dinner among friends. It wasn't love at first sight, but it didn't take long for us to grow close. After a year of dating, we tied the knot shortly after graduating college. Our early days of marriage were tough, finding jobs, managing tight finances, and figuring out how to live together as partners. But we made it work. Eventually, I landed a well-paying job that matched my skills, and Amber found success in her career. Slowly, we stabilized and began building the life we had always envisioned. As things settled down, the topic of starting a family naturally came up. Amber once shared her dream of having a son and a daughter, but she also expressed concerns about potential health complications. We were cautious, taking courses, speaking to doctors, and planning for the future. But then, unexpectedly, Amber changed her mind. She suggested we wait and focus on improving our living conditions first. I agreed, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in her. At first, I chalked it up to her being practical. But as the months passed, her behavior became harder to ignore. She seemed distracted, spending hours on social media or buried in work on her password-protected laptop and phone. Small misunderstandings became common, and secrets began surfacing. These changes didn't disrupt our daily routines too much but had a noticeable impact on our intimacy. Amber often came home late, exhausted, and retreated into her work. Concerned, I tried to have an open conversation about what was going on. I hoped we could clear the air, but instead, it turned into a heated argument. She accused me of not respecting her dedication to her job, leaving me more confused than ever. Little did I know, the truth behind her behavior would soon come crashing into my life, shattering everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The turning point came on what I thought would be an ordinary day. I decided to surprise Amber by leaving work early. My plan was simple: pick up some flowers, invite her to a nice restaurant, and have a heartfelt conversation about what was going on between us. I wanted to understand her feelings and find a way to reconnect. When I walked into our apartment, flowers in hand, I was greeted by a sight straight out of a nightmare. There, in the kitchen, was my wife, engaged in an intimate moment with another man. The bouquet slipped from my hand as a mix of shock, rage, and disbelief consumed me. The man was older, possibly in his 40s, with a polished but unremarkable appearance. He spoke broken English with a thick accent, and it quickly became clear that this was no casual fling. Amber, seemingly unbothered by the chaos, declared that she planned to leave me for this man, who had come to rescue her. He intended to take her to Mexico, where, according to Amber, he owned a big business in Playa del Carmen. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place. I remembered finding Spanish-language books hidden in her underwear drawer months earlier, wondering why she had suddenly taken up a new hobby. It wasn't just a passing interest, it was preparation for a new life she had been planning behind my back. They confessed their relationship had started online and escalated into a physical affair over the past month. The man claimed he loved Amber and had been waiting for the right moment to sweep her away. They were even prepared for this encounter. Amber had packed her bags and signed divorce papers. Their flight to Mexico was booked, leaving in 2 weeks. She told me she didn't need anything from me anymore, as her lover promised to provide everything. Anger boiled over, and I lashed out, punching the man in the stomach. He stumbled backward, retreating toward the door in a panic. Amber, instead of showing remorse, berated me for my behavior. Her audacity only fueled my rage. Without a second thought, I grabbed her by the hair, dragged her out of the apartment, and slammed the door behind her. Moments later, I threw her packed suitcases out after her. She shouted threats about calling the police, but I was beyond caring. For a fleeting moment, I considered doing something I'd regret, but instead, I walked away. I called my boss, explained the situation, and requested a week off. He understood and granted me the time. The next few days were a blur of pain and alcohol. I spent my days lying on the couch, drowning my sorrows, and trying to process the betrayal. The life I thought I was building with Amber had been a lie. Her affair wasn't just a betrayal of me, it was a betrayal of everything we had worked for together. By the time my week of isolation ended, I had come to terms with the fact that my marriage was over. I felt hollow, but the idea of chasing after someone who could hurt me so deeply seemed worse than facing the pain of moving on. Then, 3 weeks later, a new chapter of this bizarre story unfolded. I came home from work one evening, ate dinner, and settled on the couch with a beer, hoping to escape into some mindless TV. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. Standing on the doorstep was Amber. Her face was pale, her expression desperate. She insisted we needed to talk and begged me to hear her out. Reluctantly, I let her in, curious about what she could possibly have to say after all that had happened. Her revelation stunned me. The man she had left me for, the one she claimed was her great love, had been playing her all along. It turned out he had a string of women across America, and Amber was just one of many. To make matters worse, he had chosen a younger woman, a 19-year-old girl, and had already flown back to Mexico with her. Amber was left with nothing. He had taken all her money, her savings, and her expensive jewelry. In a matter of weeks, she went from planning a new life in Mexico to being utterly abandoned and broke. She moved back in with her parents, where she spent a week reflecting on her choices. Now, standing in front of me, she claimed to have realized the depth of her mistakes. She begged for forgiveness, saying she still loved me and wanted to make things right. She promised to work on herself, swore she'd never betray me again, and even expressed a renewed desire to start a family. I listened to her tearful pleas, but my heart had hardened. I played along, telling her I needed time to think and asking for 3 weeks to decide. To make things more interesting, I mentioned that I'd been spending time with other women, just to see the reaction on her face. When she returned 3 weeks later, she seemed hopeful that I'd change my mind. Instead, I told her my decision was final. I couldn't move past the betrayal, and no amount of apologies could repair the damage she had done. Amber cried, but I didn't feel the same sadness. The pain she had caused had burned away any tender feelings I once had for her. The divorce brought a sense of relief, a freedom I hadn't realized I needed. The divorce process unfolded quickly, but the emotions dragged on like a storm refusing to pass. Amber seemed to hold on to hope even as I stayed resolute. Her repeated apologies and pleas for another chance fell on deaf ears. Each time she reached out, I was reminded of her betrayal, of how she had plotted a new life while I was blissfully unaware, thinking we were working toward a future together. After the divorce was finalized, I started piecing my life back together. I moved into my grandmother's old apartment, a small but comfortable space that gave me the solitude I desperately needed. Being alone felt strange at first, but it gave me the clarity to think. I had lost my marriage, but I had gained something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Amber, on the other hand, was not faring well. I heard through mutual acquaintances that her parents were furious with her. They took her back in after her disastrous affair but made it clear they were ashamed of her actions. They blamed her for throwing away her marriage and openly disapproved of her choices. Despite the support from her family dwindling, Amber tried to reconnect with me. She sent long, emotional messages, recounting our early days together and begging for forgiveness. She promised to change, offering to meet any condition I said if it meant we could try again. She even expressed a desperate desire to start a family with me, a painful irony given how easily she had been ready to leave it all behind. I gave her no encouragement. I wasn't interested in empty promises or trying to rebuild something that was fundamentally broken. I knew any attempt to reconcile would be doomed to fail, and I had no intention of putting myself through more heartache. In the weeks following the divorce, I focused on myself. I started working out again, finding solace in the physical exertion. I spent time reconnecting with old friends, people I had unintentionally drifted away from during my marriage. Slowly but surely, I felt myself coming back to life. One day, while sorting through some old belongings, I found a photo album from our early years together. For a moment, I hesitated. Seeing those photos stirred up a mix of emotions: nostalgia, sadness, anger, but they also reminded me of how much I had given to someone who didn't value it. That thought solidified my resolve. There was no going back. Meanwhile, Amber continued her downward spiral. She couldn't seem to find her footing after the divorce. Her affair with the Mexican man had left her financially drained, and any job prospects she had were complicated by her return to her parents' home. From what I gathered, she was living a shadow of the life she had envisioned. Her attempts to reconnect with me became less frequent over time. Eventually, they stopped altogether. I didn't ask how she was doing, nor did I care to find out. My focus was on moving forward. I started dating again, cautiously at first. After the whirlwind of betrayal, I found myself wary of opening up to someone new. But with time, I met someone who felt different. She was kind, grounded, and patient, qualities that reminded me of what I should have been looking for all along. To my surprise, my new girlfriend and I hit it off quickly. She understood my hesitations and never pressured me to move faster than I was ready. Being with her felt easy, natural, and free of the complications that had plagued my previous relationship. Amber, on the other hand, seemed stuck. Rumors reached me through mutual acquaintances that she regretted everything. She occasionally vented to friends about how she wished she could turn back time, but it was too late for that. Her actions had burned every bridge she once had. As I built a new life, the scars from my marriage began to fade. I learned to laugh again, to enjoy the little things that had once felt hollow. My girlfriend brought light into my life in ways I hadn't expected, and I found myself looking forward to the future for the first time in years. Amber's story, though once intertwined with mine, became a distant memory. Her choices had set both of us on separate paths, hers marked by regret and mine by renewal. The betrayal had been painful, but it taught me an invaluable lesson about self-worth and the importance of choosing someone who truly values you. The end of my marriage was devastating, but it marked the beginning of something better. Amber's betrayal left scars, but it also taught me what I needed to value in myself and others. I learned to stop chasing someone who didn't appreciate what we had and to focus on building a life filled with honesty and mutual respect. Amber faded into the background of my life, a chapter that had closed for good. I stopped wondering about her or what might have been, choosing instead to invest my energy in my own growth. My relationship with my new girlfriend gave me hope for the future, reminding me that love isn't supposed to hurt. Meanwhile, Amber's life remained a cautionary tale. Stripped of her affair's illusions, she was left to rebuild from the wreckage she created. Her parents' disappointment, her lost stability, and the absence of a solid future were consequences of her own making. I couldn't afford to waste time dwelling on her regrets or wondering how she would recover. That was no longer my concern. Moving forward wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I embraced my independence, reconnected with my passions, and found happiness in places I'd forgotten to look. Though the pain of betrayal will always be part of my story, it no longer defines me. If you've made it this far, thank you for reading. Life has a way of teaching us hard lessons, but it also offers new beginnings if we're willing to take them. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Your support means the world.